Okay, this time let's talk about Ayurveda. Ayurveda. So I think I'm making progress with my journey, and every time I hit an end of like a learning process, I always want to know more. So right now this phase is about Ayurveda. And of course, the first thing that I had to do when I was looking to Ayurveda, I had to search on, not Google, but YouTube, what Ayurveda is. And it's very confusing because there's a lot of information about it that's, I wouldn't necessarily say relevant information. I think it only scratches the surface, so I had to go look for, I would say, a relevant source if I was gonna look for a good definition of what Ayurveda is and what Ayurveda can do. So of course I had to start with Sadhguru and what he thinks about it, and I saw where he had an interview where he had a conversation with a doctor named, an Ayurvedic doctor by the name Dr. Vasant Lad. So I acquired his book called Ayurveda, The Science of Self-Healing, and I started with that. I actually read the book and finished it within 2 days, and same thing, it also just scratched the surface. It was explaining how the body functions, types of foods, medicine, the Vata, Kapha, and Pitta, which are the tridoshas, and he explained what those are, and I think it was also just like a surface level. So I think this was a good introductory course or book to go deeper into Ayurveda. And before I started looking for more relevant books about Ayurveda, towards the end of the book it did say, learn a little bit of Ayurveda, and then maybe the next step would be to learn about the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. Forgive me, I don't really necessarily know how to say these, but my intention, I just really want to learn. And so I'm in that phase right now where I am going to look into the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So the first thing I did, of course, not Google, but YouTube. So I did my search, and there are actually some information on YouTube, and I started with like a 30-minute video, which also just really scratched the surface. And I started with that kind of an introduction of who Patanjali is and his intent of why he wrote the Yoga Sutras. And I finished that for 30 minutes. Then the next thing, I know I need to dive deeper into these Yoga Sutras. So there's a 3-hour video crowdcast by the Sanskrit channel, and I'm actually halfway through it, and it is very, very enlightening, to say the least. I know that doesn't encompass the learning process that I've gone through just listening to an hour and 30 minutes of it, but it does explain in very detail these sutras, like how to say the sutras, what it really means, because the original text of the Yoga Sutras is in Sanskrit. And of course, as much as I wanted to learn Sanskrit, I wanted to learn the Yoga Sutras more before I learned Sanskrit. Maybe the desire of learning Sanskrit is not as intense as the desire to learn what the Yoga Sutras are saying and mean. So yes, Sanskrit, back burner, Yoga Sutras right now. So I am actually trying, not that I consciously tried to compare it with the Bhagavad Gita, but I haven't finished the Gita as well, because there are some phases of the Gita where I think I'm 75% complete. Chapter 13, the field and the knower, I'm in that chapter, and I feel like it's kind of the same theme repeatedly from the chapters before. Forgive me, I may not really see the difference. Maybe because I am not accustomed to the slight differences. There could be a lot of differences, but I'm probably only seeing it in the surface. Hence, I haven't really moved further past chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita. But from time to time, when the interest comes, I go back to it. But right now, I am enamored by the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. The Sanskrit channel, where they explain every single sutra in detail and how to say it in Sanskrit. But I think the value in it is the explanation of the Sanskrit words and translating it into English, not just like, oh, this is the translation of it, but a very, very profound explanation where it goes beyond and tries to not do it hastily, because there are some English words that don't really define like exactly the Sanskrit words, so they go into detail with these sutras. And what's also really interesting is how Patanjali is described to be very analytical, very logical, but he's very concise with his sutras. It is also explained in this 3-hour long video. And it kind of makes sense because, like, for example, me, as much as I want a shortcut, which is devotion, in my brain it just doesn't make sense to just be devoted. Like, I want the shortcut, but the devotion in me doesn't function well because the analytical side of my brain says it doesn't make sense. Hence, I go into the analytical path and go through spiritual reasoning. And I think that's why I've stumbled upon Patanjali, which I am so grateful for, because he does take me into a deeper level of reasoning and deep thought and analysis of how this life really functions. Basically, I'm collecting manuscripts and manuscripts of a manual of how this life works. So yes, I'm also still going through a lot in my life right now, some challenges, which is basically a lot of illusions, a lot of illusions. I would say it's just my brain activity, imagination, judgment, misjudgment, and remembrance. Also sleep. It keeps happening in my brain, and because I'm still very identified with my thought and my body still cannot let go of them at will. But I am making progress, and I think this step of delving into the Yoga Sutras is a big step, and I hope it'll get me further into my journey, to my internal journey. So yes, right now guys, I do recommend listening to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali from the Sanskrit channel here on YouTube. A warning though, I think having to listen to it without any further knowledge of what yoga is, or prior study of what yoga can do, what it is meant to do, I think you won't necessarily really appreciate it as much. So I do recommend, if the Yoga Sutras don't suit you and it doesn't steer any emotions of wonder and wanting to learn more, I think it is not time. I think one has to go through a lot of samsara first before they realize that yes, and now yoga, which is the beginning of the Yoga Sutras. I know I still go back and forth into samsara and back into my resolve, and in moments where I go back to my resolve and actually try and learn the manual of life, I am grateful for. And the moments where I'm stuck in samsara is because I have experienced pleasure again, and I will be back in my resolve once I've experienced suffering again. Right now, you know I'm suffering, hence I'm back in my resolve. May you have enough gas for your journey.